What advice would you give other guys starting out in construction project management?
I think if you don't have at least a little bit of passion for it, don't do it. There's too many things in this profession that if you don't really love it deep down, that it's not going to work out. You need to be constantly learning, constantly evolving, or you're going to get stuck. You'll have this one day that is just horrible. I call it like the day of reckoning. You kind of just question, is this right for me? Is this what I should be doing? And
you got to be a go-getter. You got to realize that you don't know everything. Even if you do have a ton of experience, you don't know everything. Humility, hungry, honesty, just those 3 H's, if you can keep that in mind, and
constantly evaluating where you're at, evaluating how you can get better, and just kind of pushing through. There's going to be some resiliency that you're going to have to build up.
Good afternoon, friends, or good evening, or good morning, or whatever time it is when you're watching us or listening to us on the Your Project Shepherd podcast. I am your host, as always, Curtis Lawson, and joining me today are Matt Sneller, who I think this is like your third or fourth or fifth time. You're like number 2 on the rankings behind Toner, I think, as far as visits go.
I'll take it. I don't think I can surpass him. That's too hard to do.
So Matt Sneller with Sneller Custom Homes, and for the first time, Cade Slump. Cade is one of Matt's project managers, right?
That's correct.
Do you call them project managers, superintendents?
Project directors.
Project directors.
Used to be something different.
Okay. Yeah, the term project manager, superintendent, project director, whatever, all these terms are kind of used kind of interchangeably in residential.
At least in residential, yeah. I think in commercial, there's a little bit more delineation between superintendent and project manager, but in residential, they're pretty synonymous.
Yeah, I think in commercial, project managers are usually guys who are sitting in the office, kind of doing more of the paperwork side of it, more of the scheduling, and then the superintendents are the guys in the field, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of the terminology.
Exactly. Yep, I think so.
So anyway, I thought it would be fun to do a show about getting started in project management, or maybe something like lessons learned in your first year or earlier in your career in project management, and kind of do an episode to kind of help people who are either wanting to get into this or just starting out to help them to learn and grow, or for people who own companies like you and I to maybe have some things to think about to help your young staff grow and develop. So we were at an event at your office earlier this year, maybe late last year. It was the F1 event that Toner held at your office. Yep. And Cade and I were talking. I kind of floated it past him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that'd be awesome." And then you were gracious enough to agree to come and do this as well. So absolutely. I'm excited. Thank y'all.
Yeah, glad to be here, man.
So I just want to kind of start off with a little background and kind of start by talking to Cade, and just tell me kind of your story and where you came from, how you got into doing what you're doing right now. You know, did you go to school for project management? You know, family history in that, or what was your experience?
Yeah, I've always just kind of had an inherent interest in building things from a young age. I've really enjoyed seeing my work visualized in real life. And high school was always working for buddies' dads in construction, helping sweep sites and demo walls and anything I could do to just get on a site. And then college came, and I went to school at University of Wyoming for construction management. Ended up actually dropping out of the program.
Wait, you did?
I did.
Oh, I did. I didn't know that.
I just faked that diploma.
Check that resume. Check the resume.
Yeah, but it was a fun year. But I was in school.
Too fun of a year.
7 of my good buddies from high school all landed on the same dorm floor. It was the least productive year of my life. And on top of that, the curriculum for the construction management courses was vastly commercial. There was really no mention of residential, which makes sense on that scale. But I've never had a bone in my body that's interested in commercial work. I just think it tends to be more transactional than emotionally driven, and building something for a family to me is it's much more impactful. So then I dropped out and figured, okay, well, maybe if I can't go this route, I can try to get into a company and do some of the labor and just kind of work my way up from there. So cold called a bunch of remodeling companies in the Denver area, kind of gave them my story, told them I don't really know anything, but I want to learn. Finally got one to stick, and worked for him for a while. Did a lot of small remodels, bathrooms, kitchens, and again, I was the guy sweeping. I was cutting the material for the main guys, the foremans on site, and just tried to be a sponge, just soak up everything I could. Then that kind of snowballed. I ended up flipping homes with my family. Again, in the Denver area, we ended up flipping 4 homes over the course of a year. And then we also, on top of that, did 1 remodel for a client. So that was kind of my first experience actually working for a client. And working with family just gets a little dicey.
Yeah, never do that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jenny, if you're listening. That's my wife.
So at the time, my girlfriend, wife now, decided it was just kind of a good time in our lives to explore a little bit, maybe get out of the state, kind of go off on our own. And yeah, we landed on Houston. I tried to do as much due diligence as I could on some of the builders, saw a Sneller listing on Indeed.
And you still applied there.
And I applied. Yeah.
Obviously didn't do that much due diligence.
Yeah. But yeah, and for whatever reason, they hired me. So the rest is history.
So when you first started, you were kind of the guy who was like schlepping materials and going to fetch the left-handed crescent wrench for the carpenter and the all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What surprised you the most? You know, what were your expectations kind of coming into this, and what was like the biggest revelation that you had that was like a lot different than your childhood dream of being a project manager?
Well, I think a lot of it, when I was doing the flips and I was the one with the tool belt on, if I'm hanging sheetrock and there's a framing issue, I can stop real quick, go grab my other tools, fix the issue, and proceed. And that's kind of the case throughout the whole project. If a pipe's in the wrong location, all right, well, I'm the one who did that work, so let's just cut open the wall and move that pipe and get on with it. That's not the case at this level when you're strictly managing these projects. You have to be just really diligent about the processes and understanding that these guys, they don't want to come back. If their scope of work is completed, to get them back on site to fix some of these issues is it causes project delays and can cause contention in some cases. And so that, to me, I think was the biggest, switching from more belt on kind of guy to the project management side. It was just it's not as easy to correct some of these little mistakes that they used to be simple to just reel and get on with the project. So I'd say that was a big one coming from that side of things. I don't know if I could trace back from like childhood dream to this.
Is it as glamorous as you thought it would be?
At times. I still think that it still provides me that same, like, I guess, satisfaction with the job that I thought it always would, like still being able to just see the work that is still the case. Like that hasn't changed. And it still is. You get to go home and, you know, show people photos of these projects you're working on. And, you know, you always hear the story driving by the house and, oh, I worked on that house. Yep. But it is cool. I mean, cause it's something that's going to be standing for a really long time. Odds are there's going to be multiple people using that space, multiple families across the lifetime of that project. And you just inadvertently affect a lot of people in the place that they spend the most of their time.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I love the sense of satisfaction that you get from on a remodel, let's say, from seeing it go from one state to another, or on a new construction, you know, going from either the empty lot or the tear down to that final product. And what you said about, you know, kind of multiple generations, or multiple, not generations, but kind of sets of families inhabiting that space over the house's lifetime. I mean, I've had people, they're the third owner of the house since we did it, and they'll call me and be like, hey, I know that you built this house. We want to have something done to it. And by the way, we love this house. It's awesome. That's like one of the greatest feelings is having people, you know, bring that up and compliment you and tell you how much they love something that you did 15 years ago.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's
a great sense of satisfaction. I feel like there's not that many jobs out there where you can get that sense of satisfaction. You know, my wife, who works in the chemical engineering world, she doesn't have that sense of satisfaction, you know?
There's so few jobs left that you're dealing with the direct end user. It's like, we're dealing with the clients that are going to live in this house right now. And like you said, other families in the future, but it's like to have that satisfaction of getting to improve their life and give them a space that their family literally spends the majority of their time. It's awesome. I mean, like you said, most industries don't get that. Teachers are maybe one of the only other ones that are, kind of that direct user. But most people just, they're working for a corporation and don't really get to know how their day-to-day job affects another person, but we get to see that every single day.
And I think it's one of the few jobs out there that won't be replaced by some sort of AI. I mean, there's always...
You don't think robots will be building our houses in 100 years?
I mean, there's always some level of automation that's going to happen, right? I mean, you'll get the 3D printed houses, stuff like that. But there still has to be somebody who's, on the design side to start with, the scheduling, kind of the management of it, kind of making it all come together. I mean, AI is not, and it might take some part of that. Robots might take some part of that, but it's not going to be a no people involved type scenario. At least I don't think.
Yeah.
Not in our lifetime, that's for sure.
Exactly. Not our problem. It'll be Cade's problem.
Until you're like Star Wars, Star Trek, type time frame when, things just happen, right?
Exactly.
Materialize.
Well, then you got to build the ships.
Thinking back to when you first started, what was kind of the biggest daunting task or the biggest thing where you're like, oh boy, I've got to figure this out. It's basically that moment where you're like, I've got to put my big boy pants on for the first time and do this job. Was there a moment like that?
I don't know if there was like one defining moment at that. The projects that I started out on were kind of the smaller things. There was a house nearby that had some hurricane damage that we went in and did just some kind of remediation work. And so, Matt and Jenny were good about kind of starting small with things and kind of inching the way up. I think my first new build that I did was a dentist office, actually in the same complex as our office is in. So, I'm building this thing and they're all watching from the window.
No pressure.
But I think that was the first, like, oh, wow, like there's so much more going on here than I thought. That was one of the first projects that it wasn't just like interior designer, homeowner, trade communications. It was architect, structural, geotech, all of these other people that needed to be aware of what's going on, needed information of them. I needed information from them to implement onto the site. And that was kind of the first like full, I think it was like around a year build time. And first like major project, I would say that I took on, and that it was definitely an awakening to kind of see, okay, this is what this really is all about here. And I would say that project, and we, at the time, our senior PM was good about kind of talking through that and having our office right across the street, right? If I had an issue, I could just kind of walk over and talk it through. And Matt sat in on a lot of those meetings throughout that project, just checking in, making sure things were going well. So that project, I think, made me realize kind of what the full scope of this job is.
So it's really just kind of understanding like all the different players that you have to coordinate as part of the job, right? It's not just you're dealing with the subs, but it's the whole, it's kind of managing the whole team, right?
Right. And that was, like I said, my first new build. So really having the foresight throughout the project of when we're framing, I'm thinking about trim. Like we need to be thinking about these things way down the line at this point in the project to make sure when we get to that point, we don't have issues that we need to go in and rectify. And so that was the first one that was really just, to me, that showed me what a project manager is supposed to be, was like that type of project.
So it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about, it's hard to bring the trades back to fix something once it's already been done. So
and then explain it to the client.
Yeah. It's understanding the planning and having the forethought to think through all the steps that have to happen to get you from point A to point B, to make sure every pipe, every wire, every duct is in the right place so it doesn't conflict with something else. It's not just slap it in there and get it done. Right.
Right.
Matt, can I ask you some of the same questions?
Mm-hmm.
If you can think all the way back to the dawn of time to when you and I started doing
Dinosaurs
this.
roamed the earth and we started building houses.
Yeah, when you had to fight off the T-Rex.
We didn't have to fight off the T-Rex, but our communication was Nextel radios. Do you remember those?
Oh, yeah.
That noise. Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, thinking back to when you first started, do you think things are different now than they were back then? I mean, obviously technology has changed some things, but do you feel like you kind of had some of the same challenges back when you first got started?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely similarities. I think a lot of things have changed. The biggest thing I think is the prevalence of cast YouTube videos. I think of Matt Reisinger and a lot of the work that he's done in the videos that he has where you can, like when I first started building, all I knew was I didn't have a construction management degree. And so it was really what I had learned just on the job site.
Mm-hmm.
And Cade came in he knew who Matt Reisinger was. And there's other podcasts and video YouTube channels that he watched and kept up with. Mm-hmm. So he had a little bit of that knowledge, if not job site experience, at least had some knowledge of like, hey, this is how a house should be built, mm-hmm. or here's what a typical or good wall assembly looks like. Whereas when I started, it was really just, I mean, what the other guys in the job site trailer with me, what they taught me from day one and walking jobs with them and learning from them, learning from the subs. So that part of it is still there. And there's still a lot of learning that happens with that. But I think it's possible for guys that even don't have any experience to come in and still have a base level of knowledge that maybe we didn't used to have.
Yeah.
So.
Do you think that, and I experienced that too, it's kind of like learning from the old guys, you kind of learn, well, this is the way we've always done it, and this is the way it's always been done, and, don't listen to that new crap, this is how you do it, right? And I honestly, like 15 plus years ago, I was totally on board with that. Like when I heard, and this was kind of pre-YouTube, Matt doing all his stuff on YouTube, when I heard of all the spray foam insulation and tight building envelopes or whatever, my first response was what I had already heard from the guys that I was working with, which was like, that's a bunch of crap, don't listen to that, this is the way it's always been done, if it worked in the 1950s it's going to work now. And so I mean I approached it with that same attitude.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's like now, I think a lot of young guys are watching the stuff on YouTube, Instagram, whatever, and they're seeing these cool new products, like the right way to do stuff, and they're latching onto that. And that's a huge benefit. It's a huge tool that you guys have now that we didn't have.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think just in general, our society is getting to a point, both in this industry, but even just in schools and education, but we're going away a little bit from like the generational knowledge, and it's more to, I mean, all the kids these days they're growing up with an iPad in their lap, and they're looking at technology to learn how to do things before they go to somebody that's already done it and ask them how to do it. And so
yeah,
we got to be aware of it. And we've always been of the mindset that, I mean, thankfully I worked with guys that were really experienced, but I didn't really work with the kind of, curmudgeon old guy that's like, oh, we've been doing it this way for 50 years.
That's all I worked with.
Exactly. We have some of those as subcontractors, but in terms of project managers and superintendents that I worked around, I didn't have a lot of that. And so thankfully, it was a little bit easier to embrace newer technologies and ways of doing things from the beginning. So. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I didn't change my mentality until I started to see things. I started to actually see the problems that doing things like that were causing, and I started to kind of question what these guys were saying. I'm like, okay, you've been doing that way for 20 years, but yet I'm seeing all these little problems creep up. Maybe you should, change your strategy here, and embrace some of this stuff. So, I mean and also aside from that, just the advent of project management technology, I think, has really made a big difference too. I mean, like having tools, like I don't know if y'all use which software y'all use, but whether it's Builder Trend, Co-Construct, we just switched to one called Resio, whatever software system that you're using. I back then I had the yellow notepad and the day planner.
Yep.
Yeah, the leather-bound day planner.
Fax in for me. Like I started as with a production builder, and it was fax in your orders to the office and call the guys on the Nextel radio. And yeah, it was a yellow pad of paper and literally printed calendars that you would keep track of all your schedules on. And nowadays, everything's in a beautiful app on your phone, and things automatically notify subs and clients and all of that. So it's awesome.
I will say that the younger guys have a much easier time kind of latching on to just naturally using that. My older guys still kind of struggle. They got to put the readers down on their nose and hold the phone back here and kind of peck at it a little bit. But,
exactly. Yeah.
But we've kind of forcibly transitioned everyone to doing that. But it's been a lot easier for the young guys for sure. What do you look for when you're hiring? This is kind of a shift a little bit, but what do you look for when you're hiring a project management superintendent, project director? Mm-hmm. Obviously Cade came in with not a whole lot of experience. I'm sure, like me, when you post a job, you get kind of a wide range of resumes and experience. But what was it about Cade that kind of made you want to hire him? Let's build Cade up a little bit, right? But what do you look for, and what keyed you in on him?
So, in all honesty, my wife is the first line of defense, and she is the one that first realized or noticed that there's something special about Cade. I think for us, experience is important. We've tried to go the route of hiring somebody that's never done anything in construction before at all, and that was rough from a learning curve perspective. But even just from they weren't used to hard work. They weren't used to like being outside in the heat frequently, and you might have to work till 8 or 9 o'clock one night because you've got the back wall of a house that's wide open, and you need to make sure the door guys stay there until they're finished so that the house is closed up at the end of the night. And so Cade did have a little bit of that experience. And so we've kind of come to the point where we realize there's got to be a little bit of experience there. It may not be that there's 50 years or 20 years of construction management experience, but having somebody that at least has a base level of remodeling or new home construction. So I think besides that, what's more important for us is character, attitude. I think we really look for people that are humble and hungry. And what I mean by hungry is not that they showed up to an interview, open for 5-course meal.
We're all well fed.
Exactly. But that they are go-getters, and that they don't just sit around waiting for things to be handed to them or solutions to be handed to them. We often talk about being relentless problem solvers, and I want people that have that attitude. And so that's very important to us. And then the humility is a huge part of it too. We've never been you screw up, we're going to fire you, or scream at you for screwing up. If you screw up once, we're going to have a discussion about it. What happened? Why did it happen? Did you learn your lesson? You keep screwing up and the same thing over and over again, we might have a problem. But it's that people that are willing to take that criticism and take the correction humbly, and not just be like, well, it's not my fault. It's the sub that did it wrong. Well, technically, yes, but you're the one that's managing the sub. And so it's your responsibility to make sure that it was done right. So Cade's always had those qualities from the beginning and still does, which is one of many things that we love about him. But those are probably the two biggest ones I would say, are the humility and the hunger.
Yeah. I think builders who have that attitude with their employees, kind of the grace of let's get past that mistake. Let's talk about it. Let's learn from it and move on. I think builders, company owners who have that attitude also tend to act that way themselves when dealing with clients. So I'm very similar in that way. At least I like to think so. I believe in, we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to screw up. Every job that we do, every house that we build is a learning experience. It's being honest with the clients too, and saying, hey, we made a mistake. We're going to fix it. We're going to work together to make sure this doesn't happen again. But just showing the clients also that we're human too. I think companies have better client relationships who interact that way with their employees and with their clients. It's humility, right? Yeah,
that's such a good point. I think the clients see us interact with each other that way. They see us interact with our subs that way. And you're right. It I think naturally makes it easier for them to act that way with us. And we often tell clients when we do our kind of project kickoff pre-construction meeting that, hey, there's going to be some things that go wrong. Like it absolutely guarantee. I don't know what it'll be on your project, but something will go wrong. And all we ask is that you be patient with us. And, if you're the first one that sees it, if it's walking in at 8:00 at night and your living room ceiling is caving in because somebody left a water line running that shouldn't have, you may not be calm, but at least give us a benefit of the doubt and let us
fix it.
Let us fix it. Don't just freak out and, fire us because, you don't know what you're doing. Things happen.
Well, there's a big difference too between being honest about your mistake and taking ownership and fixing it, and making excuses, trying to hide it, trying to cover it up, passing the buck on the subcontractor, whatever. It's giving your clients the kind of the comfort of knowing, hey, we've got this. We're going to fix it. If something happens, we're going to fix it.
Yeah. And the same goes with, I feel like with my guys, with the project directors, is, hey, if you mess something up, don't try to hide it. That is where, if you want to see me get really upset, that's when I'll get upset, is when you're trying to hide something. But if you just be honest with me and be like, hey, I forgot to do this. I know you told me to do this. We forgot to do it before we sheetrocked. Now we got to open up the sheetrock and fix it, or whatever. Whatever the issue is, just be honest about it. We all make mistakes, and don't try to hide it.
Yeah, and it's having that. Sorry, we're kind of getting off track here of young project managers, but I like this line of discussion. It's also acting the same way with your subcontractors too. Totally. It's like I've been around plenty of builders who just do nothing but hammer on their subcontractors. It's like, you make a mistake, you eat it type mentality, right? And I think we also have to deal with our subs the same way. It's like they're human. They're going to make a mistake, and knowing maybe sometimes knowing their financial situation, or knowing how much kind of they have in the job to eat stuff like that. I don't always make them eat all of every mistake. I mean, I'm not going to eat it all for sure.
Exactly.
All right. It's having that discussion with the sub and saying, hey, I understand it's a honest mistake. Let's split that, or you cover the labor, I'll buy the materials, or vice versa. Right. It's having the same attitude with the project staff, the customers, and the subs, right? Yeah. It's just kind of that general way of operating that I think will make you successful.
Yeah. Well, and we're in such a weird position as builders and remodelers that we don't just have one customer. We have our client that is one customer, but then I feel like our subcontractors and trade partners are another customer. Our architects and interior designers that we work with are another customer. And so it's like, you're trying to keep everybody happy, and that opportunity for mistakes is on all those levels. And so you're absolutely right in that. And then the same goes with our architect partners. They might draw something wrong. They do make mistakes every now and then, and they might draw something wrong, and we built it exactly per plans, and it's against code, or it didn't look right, or whatever. We're pretty slow to just rip into them and say, this is your fault, you need to pay for it. It's, hey, this doesn't look right. Can you come look at this? And then it's like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's not right. And then let's figure out a way to fix it where it's okay for both of us. I don't expect you to, just bend over and take it, but I also expect you to take a little ownership in it of, hey, yeah, I drew this wrong. Let's figure out the best way to fix it. So,
yep, exactly. All right. So kind of getting back on track, we talked about kind of the curmudgeon way of doing things. Something I experience, or I've observed a lot rather, is when you've got a younger project manager coming into a situation and you've got some older established crews, it's kind of dealing with the wariness that's there from the curmudgeon side of things. This young whippersnapper is going to come in here and, he can't be the boss of me. He doesn't know how to tie his own shoelaces, How does a new young project director kind of gain the trust and the respect of the old curmudgeon contingent?
I think the very first thing is respecting them, and making sure that they understand that you are the young guy. You're the fresh guy, and I'm not hiding behind that. I'm not pretending I'm not. But that's gonna come with some questions on my end, and I might ask you to do something that you're like, hey, we're nowhere near ready for that phase. Why are you sending me to the site? Plenty of interactions like that. But I think it just takes time. I think it takes going through multiple projects and showing these guys that, you're making progress every time. And you're getting better at sending them when the full scope of work is ready for them to complete, and making sure that their materials are on site where they need it. And it's just constantly improving that till you kind of get to the point where they understand, okay, he's at a point now where he understands what he's doing. I know that when he calls me out to site, it's going to be ready. Honestly, most of our we have a few, of course, everyone does, but I think Matt kind of looks in our subcontractors the same kind of thing that he looks for in his project managers. And so that has our sub bases. They're easy people to get a hold of. They're easy people to talk to. They're not that kind of typical aggressive personality type.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you might get a crew or two that got a few guys like that on it, sure. But I would say there was never a case with any of our subs that I just felt completely disrespected, and that fortunately I never really had to go through that. But yeah, I think it just takes time with a lot of those guys.
What's your take on that?
Same. I mean, I think again, it goes to the humility. Like, you just have to admit that you don't know, and tell them. I mean, they obviously can see your age, and they guys that have been doing it a while know pretty quick if you know what you're doing or not, and they can kind of call BS on it. Yeah. And so I think
you can kind of tell by the way people talk about things whether or not they know if they
exactly
know their stuff.
Yeah, and I think just not taking yourself too seriously to where like you're just going to get so upset or down on yourself for not knowing what something's called, or when your tile guy asks for something, you're like, I have no clue what he's asking for. You just have to be honest and be like, hey, what do you mean by that? I'm not familiar with that term, or I thought this is what comes next, but you're telling me that that's not true. And I think you have to trust your subs, but you also have to be willing to call, for Cade to call me, or we've got a lead project director that's kind of over them that he can call Zach and be like, hey, the tile setter's telling me this. It's not the way we typically do things. Is that normal, or is that okay if we do it that way? And just, again, it's the humility to call and ask somebody else, and not just assume that you know everything.
I like the and even for me, as someone who's been doing this a long time, if there's something that I don't know how to do, that it's a new thing, there's something that's like out of my wheelhouse, I'll go to the guy doing the work who knows what he's doing, and just say, hey, honestly, I'm new at this. Let's talk about it. You tell me the best way for this thing to flow. Mm-hmm. You tell me how you like to do it, and then let's make that kind of fit within the project schedule. As long as we're getting the same result, it's letting them know that you trust their experience and their expertise, and that you're not going to try to come in and steamroll it and say, I'm the project manager, you're going to do it my way. It's like, let's work collaboratively on this, right? Yeah,
no, absolutely. I think even and actually, Cade did something that's fairly new for us as a company. He just started a big new build project out for us, and probably about 4 months ago it started. And so he was like, hey, before we actually break ground, I really want to sit down with key subs and have a pre-construction meeting with them, where I get a group of subs, like all the mechanical subs together, or the site guy, the foundation guy, and let's just sit in the office for an hour and kind of see what questions they have. I can go over my expectations for how the project's going to go. And I was like, yeah, that's great. And what's cool about that is that it sets the expectations up front. But what I also liked about it was we asked questions in that meeting, and it was some of the subs had ways of doing things that we hadn't done before. And it was like, oh, that's really cool. And so I think one of the first meetings is when we realized that. And so all the subsequent meetings, we would just ask them, hey, is there anything that other builders are doing, either a different technique, a different product that you think is really cool or is better that you think we should be using? And almost all of them have at least something, and it will end up making for a better build and a better overall product for our client, which is awesome.
Yeah, and it makes them feel like they're heard and part of the process, and kind of get some buy-in from them as well.
For sure. Absolutely.
Right? What about inter-office relations? So again, kind of the same experience. I would assume like me and a lot of companies, you've got kind of a group of people that have been there for a while that have been doing things a certain way. How does somebody new and green come in and kind of earn the respect of the the office, of the team in the office?
Shut up and listen in meetings, which is not necessarily my strongest suit, but I think just especially those first like foundational months where you're kind of learning everybody still, learning the processes and just understanding expectations and all that. It's just super critical to just be an absolute sponge to everything, and they don't need your opinion yet. So I think that, in same way with the subs. I mean, I don't think you necessarily need to treat it any differently. If you're working with another PM that's got 15 years on you, that is a resource. They're at the same company as you. We all have the same mission, the same goal. And so use them as a resource. And I think it's easier than people think if you just take the humility aspect of it and know your place, especially in those first couple of years. Like, you're just forming everything still. And so, yeah.
And there's always something to be said about just keeping your mouth shut and letting your actions speak for you. It's like, earn their respect by putting your head down, getting the job done, and letting them see, oh, wow, Cade's really kicking butt on this. Like maybe I could learn something from watching something he's doing, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and not being the person that comes in that just always has the better idea. Like, well, why aren't we doing it this way? Like, you can say that eventually once you've earned our attention and our respect to be able to offer that advice. But like, if you're the brand new guy, don't come in and tell us all the things we're doing wrong. Like, and Cade didn't do that. I'm not saying he did, but I will say
I've seen those guys.
We've had those guys in interviews before, where like, my wife Jenny is the one that kind of does the initial interview, and that'll go pretty well. And so we'll bring that person in, and they'll sit down with me, and then we'll maybe introduce them to 2 or 3 of the guys and let them kind of chat. And we're like, they spent that entire time talking about either where they're working now and how everything's screwed up and they have all these amazing ideas of how to fix everything, or they're telling us the things we're doing wrong. You're like, what in the world? I don't want you working for me. Like, this is only going to get worse.
I've had guys come in and say, well, why aren't you using that product? Well, why aren't you using that software? Why aren't you doing? I'm like, dude, that's not what we're here for. This is not winning my heart.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, eventually you can get to the place where you can suggest those things, and I'm all for that, and I'm all for listening, but you need to earn my respect first and let me realize that you actually know what you're talking about in regards to that before you just start mouthing off about it. So
let's talk about growth, development, training, all that kind of stuff. So since you started, what skills have you found the most crucial to work on, to develop? I mean, we kind of talked about the foresight and kind of the planning side of things. Any other skills other than that you think or that you've thought, hey, I really need to focus on developing that?
Yeah. Organization and communication, which maybe touches a bit on the planning, but I think that when there were a lot of times early on where I'd go in, I'd walk a site, and I'll sit and chat with the homeowner, talk about the progress. They'll give me a couple action items, and I store them in here and walk out and go to the next site, and then those are gone. And a week later, they're reaching out, hey, do we have any progress on this? And I still haven't done anything on that action item. So just getting better about notating specific things, organizing meetings with our clients to where it almost creates that environment for me. Like, instead of just a bunch of random one-off meetings, let's set a schedule every week at the same time we meet. We walk the site. I will get there 20 minutes early, set up all my stuff, make sure I can take all the notes I need to take. And so I think if you go back and look at my annual reviews, those first couple of years, the organization and communication.
I should have asked you to bring those. Let's review those here on live on air.
Yeah.
Be cruel.
I mean, and then the communication route is just making sure on those action items that every party that's involved is aware. And again, that's not just if the homeowner wants to make a change to the brick, that's not just informing our mason, but that's informing our selections coordinator, our vendor, the designer on the project that they want to make this change. There's just you can't over communicate for the most part. There's some people that will just start ignoring your emails, but and then learning communication. I don't talk to my plumber the same way I talk to one of our clients or the same way I talk to the architect. There are different communication avenues that different people grasp onto more, and you just throughout the course of a project, you learn that. And, maybe they're not as receptive to text messages as they are to emails. Maybe they never get back to me on email, but they're always calling me. So, a phone call is the best way to get an answer. So just communication and organization overall, I think, is something I'm still working on today. But that, I would say, was kind of the biggest hurdle in the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's something that we all have to continuously work on. Even being around for a long time, we always have to learn the communication styles of the people that we're dealing with and learn how to get the most out of that. But
adjust constantly.
Yeah. But the documentation side too. I mean, I am not a hyper organized person myself, and so I have to like really make a conscious effort to document things and take notes. And that's one way that the software systems are great. Whether it's Builder Trend, Co-Construct, Resio, whatever you're using, but using that technology to take meeting notes, to make action items, to-dos, things like that. That's a skill that takes some developing, and that I think I've observed a lot of newer people not immediately latching onto. Yeah, they're like, oh, I got this. It's all up here, right?
I would say that is probably the most common conversation that I have with project directors over any that we've ever hired, and all the ones that work for me today it's that idea of, hey, anytime you're walking a job site, you either have your Sneller notebook that you're taking notes in, or you have your phone out that you're taking notes in Builder Trend or sending yourself an email. But there's always there's too much. For one, there's too much going on, even just in one project, and then you multiply that over carrying 2, 3, 4 projects, and you're in the middle of it's all fresh in your mind, like Cade said, and then you get a phone call from a different client, and you got to go put out a fire over at that project. And so you totally forget the 4 or 5 action items that you had for the last project. And so if it's written down to where you can always go back either, and I've always been big on, I'm not going to force you to do it my way. I had the way that really worked well for me. You don't have to do it that way, but you have to have a way that works for you, to where you're checking it on a regular basis. You're looking back through it and making sure, oh, I forgot about that. Or I called that guy and I never heard back from him. I need to follow back up with him again, because we all know in this industry, it's hardly ever one phone call or one email that gets the job done. It's usually 2 or 3, or it's an email, a phone call, and a text message before you actually hear back. So yeah, it's just,
and also just documenting what happened in a meeting too. I had this conversation with my project management staff a lot, where it's like, if you have a site meeting and the customer talks about all this stuff, don't just write down your action item. Like, have kind of like a meeting summary that you put in. I mean, I like to use it as a way to prevent future conflict too, as well. So
great point.
As soon as the meeting is over, put it in our software, or send an email, whatever, but to say, hey, thanks for the meeting today. Here's just in summary, here's what we talked about. You want to change this, I'm waiting for a selection on this. This is the schedule for the upcoming week, whatever, but just put it in a document that you send to them. That way they can't come back to you 6 months later and say, you never told me that. I'm like, actually I did. See, here on September 28th, I sent you this email,
Well, and it's crazy perceptions. Like, we can think that we said something, or we think a client said something, and then when it's written down, we write it back down, and then a client reads and they're like, that's not what I said, or that's not what I meant. And it's like, well, that's what I heard. Yeah. And so that's what I was going to schedule. Or like, well, we might tell them verbally while we're meeting, let me get a price on that, because that's above budget. So we'll have to work up a quote for that. And they might just in one ear out the other. And then in that recap meeting email or daily log or whatever, they see that I'm going to get a price from my electrician to add that. And they're like, oh, well, I didn't know that was going to be extra. You don't need to waste your time on it. I don't want to pay any extra for it. It's not that important to me. Like, oh, okay. So having that follow up, I think is huge, and something we can definitely improve on.
How have you seen Cade grow in the role? Kind of going back to growth, development, training. Actually, we'll talk on training here in a second separately. But how have you seen Cade, kind of grow from the green guy? How have you seen him change and grow into that role?
I think that organization has definitely improved. Knowing that he's walking a job site, meeting with subs, meeting with a client or an architect, and taking notes and following up on all that. I think there's definitely been growth, and even, I mean, it sounds kind of obvious, but it's in knowing how to read plans. And that's something that I think if you just have to do it a lot to get experience at it and get comfortable with it. And like, hey, why'd you build that way? And oh, I didn't realize that the plans were saying to do that. But there's a lot less of that these days. And it's a lot more of even questions from him like, hey, the plans call for this, but I don't see this in our budget. So what was our plan here? The architect called out this detail and I've never done that before. Can you help me figure out who to call? Or there's a lot more of that, I think, proactively than reactively. And that's definitely a huge area of growth for him, is just that he's spending more time reading through plans. And it's kind of we love to say, slow down to speed up. And so like, that idea of let's slow down now and take our time planning, thinking through this, and it will ultimately allow us to speed up the entire process rather than just, I think he is a go-getter. And I said that we like that in people. We like that hungry aspect, and he's always been that way. But I think in the early days and weeks and months, there was some times where it was like, just charge ahead and do it. And then afterwards be like, that wasn't the right thing to do, or, kind of the measure twice, cut once. It was more maybe every now and then it was a cut 2 or 3 times. And if we would have just measured more. So he's definitely improved a ton in that respect. So would you agree with that or no?
Yeah.
What kind of training and support do you typically give your project management staff?
This was in reading your questions ahead of time. This is the one that I was like, I should probably do a better job of that.
Yeah, me too.
GHBA, NHB have a ton of great resources in terms of education. And I think we've offered that over the years, and Cade's probably been to, what would you say?
Like 8. Yeah.
6 to 8. Yeah. Classes. There's the ABCs of home building. I personally have, I've got a couple NHB designations, graduate master builder, certified remodeler, CAP, aging in place, 3 or 4 of those that came with a lot of classes that I found really helpful.
Yep.
And so as you know, as a business owner, it's hard to pull your guys off of job sites and dealing with clients and subs to go attend a meeting. And I think sometimes I think need to just tell them, hey, you need to do this because we feel like this is important. Because sometimes it's, I already know ABCs of construction or home building. I already know what I need to know about electrical. You're always going to learn something sitting in a class like that. Yeah. It may not all be brand new news, but you're almost always going to come away with at least one little nugget, and it's worth it for that purpose.
And at least with those are like half day classes. Exactly. So it's not like a full day commitment that you're off the job site.
Yeah. So that's a big one that I think we need to be doing better. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we've got our lead project director, that's kind of, Zach has been doing it 15 years or so, I think. And so just his level of experience and having that person that the guys know that they can go to really easily, that's not as busy as I am, that's easier to get a hold of. And then we actually do a weekly production meeting where it's me and Zach and the guys all getting together and going through each and every project. And I think there's a lot of training that happens in that, and just of like, hey, as you look at your schedule for the next few weeks, have you thought about this? When is this ordered yet? And they're like, oh no, I totally forgot about that. Or, well, I was planning on, and there's some cool discussions that happen with that where it's like, oh, well, I see that you have your tile before your paint, or your cabinets after your tile or before. And they're like, well, why are you doing it that way? Well, because this guy's slow right now. And so I know that I can get him in earlier than I usually do, and it'll save me a week later on. It's like, oh, cool. You've really thought about this. And there's other times that sometimes they've just forgotten to schedule something or don't think about something. And so I think that internal education, just in terms of, and I like for us all to do that together, so that even Cade hears how Ramiro's running his project, or hears the questions I'm asking on Zach's projects. And so there's hopefully they're learning from each other as well while going through that.
Yeah, we're set up pretty much the exact same way. I've got a construction director who's over the PMs. And so in our production meeting, we do the same thing. We go over every project, and oftentimes we find ourselves on the whiteboard in the conference room, like drawing, like, how would you do this? Let's draw the detail on the whiteboard as we go, and thinking through that. And it's just kind of hearing from everyone on the team, like how they would do it. And, oh, did you think about this? This detail would make that better. And so it's that collaboration in the staff meetings, I think, that is a great place to learn and grow.
Yeah, for sure.
But also having that senior guy, Zach or Todd, in my case, that the guys know, hey, this guy's been doing this, or he's been at the company the longest. He's been doing this since he was 18 years old. He's been around the block. I know that I can go to him if I have a question about, how construction wise, how this should happen, or how does Crafted or how does Sneller do it?
Exactly.
That guy's been with the company long enough to know that this is how the company operates, right?
Absolutely.
So do you think, is on the job training more valuable than book learning? I'll put YouTube on the same level kind of for this discussion as book learning. So on the job training, book learning, and kind of educational materials, let's say, which one's more important?
I think overall on the job training, I think doing it every single day and seeing the issues, rectifying the issues is just going to stick with you so much more than watching any video or reading any book could. That being said, though, I think there is a tremendous amount you can learn. And once you're actually in the industry, you're doing it every day, and you're supplementing that with the YouTube videos, the podcast, the books, and you can actually start implementing some of those ideas in real life. And I think that's the strongest package right there. I think you need both to be really successful.
They say when you're teaching something, there's like 3 steps to teaching. There's tell, show, and do. So I think when you're training somebody, a new person, tell them what you're going to tell them, do it, and kind of show them, do it for them as much as you can, and then turn them loose for them to do it, right?
Yeah.
So those 3 steps kind of reinforce each other. But yeah, without that last step of actually doing it yourself, it doesn't sink in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think Cade made a good point that, like, it's I think maybe not the initial education. Like, again, we don't require that our project directors have a college degree or even a college degree in construction science. It's more that they've got the attitude and all of that. And then I think the book learning, whether that's YouTube or whatever, is almost more important as you're going to both maintain your knowledge, but also to grow in your knowledge, whether that's new products, new vendors, new suppliers, but also just staying on the cutting edge of things. I mean, that's why you and I both often go to the International Builder Show in Vegas every year, or there's the Sunbelt Builder Show in Dallas. And it's like being involved in those things, YouTube videos. I think this morning, Zach sent a YouTube video to all the project directors and me and just said, hey, watched this recently and thought it was really good, especially as we have a lot of projects that are coming up on sheetrock. This is like a pre-sheetrock, framing and mechanical punch list, the things that you should watch out for by Jake Bruton. And it was like awesome. And so all of us can watch that, either tonight or as we're sitting at a job site waiting for somebody to show up. And then people have been, back and forth on that text thread, like, oh, I loved this, or, oh, that's so cool, thanks for sharing. That to me is educational, but it's not a classroom, obviously.
Yeah. So. I just send out funny Instagram reels to my guys. They can make them all laugh.
It's important too.
What kind of stuff do you like to just kind of seek out on your own? I mean, not like specific YouTube channels or whatever, but like what types of things do you like to try to find information on, learn about, and help yourself grow?
I would say it is primarily podcast that is the vessel of that, and it is a lot of
the Your Project Shepherd podcast is a great educational tool, and everybody should take advantage of that.
And there's a lot, I think a lot of people know of kind of the Build Show and kind of some of these bigger ones, but you do some more digging, and and it's not just I don't just listen to them on construction. I listen to them from an architect's point of view, designer's point of view, just overall employee point of view, just like workforce point of view. I think that there's just, I mean, we sit in our trucks a lot throughout the day. We're driving a lot. So I think that is the really good time to kind of get some of that in. Is my job site's 45 minutes out. I'll throw on this podcast real quick and learn a couple things. And I'd say that's the vessel of a lot of that. YouTube, lesser so now, but definitely is what kind of kicked it all off for me, was finding a lot of those guys on YouTube. And I think you need to be constantly learning, constantly evolving, or you're going to get stuck. And, our clients have the same access to all this content that we do. And so if you're going into a situation with a client and they're bringing up, this wall assembly type, or, a special HVAC ductwork system or what, and you have no clue what they're talking about at all, I just think it's not the best look, and you need to be constantly seeking that. Well,
and I think I love the podcast format is so cool, because if you think about it in terms of a 30 to 45 minute long podcast, that's like a class. And or an hour
hour and a half, maybe.
Exactly. 30 minutes, an hour and a half. But think of it as that's a class. And like, you're taking a college class or a class on whatever that topic is. And if, as a project manager driving around the city, checking your various jobs, if you can get in 5 to 10 classes a week, that's pretty awesome. I mean, that's quite a bit of, they're not all going to be stellar. I mean, not every podcast is YourProjectShepherd, that good, that high quality level. Yeah. So some are going to be duds. But if half of what you listen to,
some of ours are duds too, by the way.
I know, the time you had that Sneller guy on, jeez. No, but if you can listen to 10 a week and 3 or 4 of those have a really good piece of information in it, or a new way of doing things, so that, when that client asks you about something, like, oh yeah, I was listening to a podcast about that recently and learned, we haven't done it yet, but you look knowledgeable and professional to the client.
These days, the clients are so much more educated than they used to be as well, because the same resources that are out there for us are out there for them. And so, over the last few years, we've had more and more people come to us and request certain, building science type products or techniques or whatever. And I'm always kind of amazed. I'm like, wow, you actually like listen to this stuff too. And
yeah, well, and it doesn't always have to be even just building science or construction methods. Like, we recently, as a company, I kind of stumbled upon a book called Unreasonable Hospitality. And it's a guy that's a restaurateur and talking about just having hospitality towards people. And we're in the luxury space. And so that's a really important thing to us. But like, there's podcasts about that. There's the audio book. And then we've been spending the last 3 or 4 weeks of our team meetings, and we'll continue to do so for the next 3 or 4, just talking about, what'd you get out of this? Or here's a short video we're going to watch. But that all came out of a podcast that I listened to, this guy being interviewed by a podcast that I regularly listen to. And so it's like, it doesn't have to be construction. It can just be how to be a better person, how to be a better, like Cade said, employee, employer, business owner, all of that is valuable.
Do you ever ask your whole staff to watch a video or listen to a podcast or whatever, and then talk about it?
Yeah. So actually, with this book specifically, we reached out and said, "Hey, let us know. I think this is a really good book. We will either buy you the audio book or we'll buy you the hard copy. Tell us what you want, and we're just going to be talking about this over the next couple months." And then we've done the same thing with videos. Hey, y'all watch this video, and either we're going to talk about it next week, or we'll even just, hey, at our team meeting, we're going to watch this 5-minute long video and then sit here for 30 minutes and talk about it.
Again, it's like a class. It's like giving a class to your employees, and that's a maybe a kind of a part of training that people don't think about. All right, so I think we're in the spirit of keeping this not at an hour long, which Daniela would love. We've had this discussion a few times. In fact, our last episode was so long we had to split it in half.
Nice.
The one that came out today was part 2. So anyway, kind of wrap this thing up, what advice would you give other young guys, well, young or just green, starting out in construction project management?
I think if you don't have at least a little bit of passion for it, don't do it. I think that's number one. I think there's too many things in this profession that if you don't really love it deep down, that it's not going to work out. But if you do have that and you're getting into it, just try your best to, you're going to have, I call it like the day of reckoning. You'll have this one day that is just horrible. I mean, nothing. and I very much have that day in my mind. And, you kind of just question, is this right for me? Is this what I should be doing? And so I think just constantly evaluating where you're at, evaluating how you can get better, and just kind of pushing through. There's going to be some resiliency that you're going to have to build up in this industry, and you're going to have to be strong-willed at times, and you're going to have to suck up to your mistakes a lot. And so just get good at that. Get good at being honest, and people see that. I've never had anyone get mad at me because I was honest with them. So I guess there's a few little things there.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Matt, what's your advice for aspiring project directors?
I mean, it's not to beat a dead horse, but it's the humility, hungry, and then, like Cade just said, the honesty. Just those 3 H's, if you can keep that in mind, and it works with any job, but I think especially in our industry, and in this role specifically, you got to realize that you don't know everything. Even if you do have a ton of experience, you don't know everything. And so have that humility, and then just be honest, whether that's about a mistake that you made, or Cade's good at this point now that he's got some experience under his belt, and he'll push back sometimes. I'm like, I don't think that's the right way we should do that, or I didn't do it that way because of this. And I respect that, and respect that he approaches that in a respectful way, but he's also comfortable enough to be able to do that, and have a discussion about it. So
that's great. So I think that kind of keeping your mouth shut and your ears open, which is kind of part of humility. I think that's my biggest piece of advice to somebody starting off, especially somebody who hasn't kind of, worn the bags and been in the field doing the job, is just, listen more than you talk.
Absolutely.
Have humility. All right. So this concludes our Cade's performance review for the year. I'm going to go ahead and recommend that he get at least a 10% raise, increase the profit sharing.
Talk to the boss about that.
How often can we do this podcast?
But Matt and Cade, thank you all so much for being here today.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it. It's great to see both of you.
Yeah. Appreciate you having us, man.
And as always, we'll be sure and link Sneller on our show notes, social media, all that kind of stuff, so folks can find Sneller Custom Homes and talk to you guys about building houses. And again, I've said this many, many times. You guys absolutely do things the right way. You're one of those companies, if I kind of see you on a list of people who are talking to aside from us, I'm like, dude, I don't care if they hire us or Matt, they're going to get a great,
feel the same way, man.
Great product. So love you guys. Y'all are awesome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
man.
All right. And thanks everybody out there for listening to the YourProjectShepherd podcast. I will see you next time. Thank you so much.